So let's begin welcome to Mr. Basile's mini lecture series. Today we're talking about Oedipus Rex, or King Oedipus, and we are starting with the third of these mini lectures. This would be the rising action and the second stasimone, which we'll cover in our packet or book, pages 39 from the very bottom through 3/4 of the way on page 49, where the where the rising action ends there, and then the second stasimone begins 3/4 of the way through the page of 49 and wraps up at the middle of page 50. So, without further ado, let's get down to it. It begins with Creon entering, right? And he is less than pleased about the slanderous accusation laid on him. He's not going to bear it. He's not going to take it. He thinks it's ridiculous. It's absurd. He can't go on and live if people are going to think he's a traitor, which, to be fair, pretty sure the penalty for being a traitor is death anyway. So he is right in both respects. Now, the chorus tries a little bit to diffuse the situation here. They're like, hey, you know, he was angry, he didn't consider his words, and then Creon, of course, is like, oh, well, really? Really? Was that how it went down? And, well, what was his intention? And they're like, hey, I can't tell you what my master thinks, but here he comes, right? And then enter Oedipus, who is almost in disbelief that Creon would dare show his face, and he goes on here to, did you suppose I wanted eyes to see the plot preparing, wits to counter it? This is a archaic form of the term wanted. It's a little older. By definition, if you want something, you don't have it. So, did you suppose I wanted eyes to see the plot preparing, wits to counter it? So did you think I didn't have eyes enough to see your plot? Did you think I wasn't smart enough to understand it? And I didn't have wits enough to figure it out? And, of course, this is ironic because he has eyes, but he can't see the truth. It wasn't Creon's plot. And he has false confidence, almost a hubristic confidence in his own ability to think things through. If anything, like any real tragic hero, this is kind of Oedipus's hamartia. His tragic errors in judgment seem to come about through his own hubris, his own belief that he couldn't ever possibly be wrong about something, or that he couldn't ever possibly be the culprit or somebody who would do something so terrible because he is such a good person. He always tries to do the right thing, except that time where the three roads met, where he kind of lost his cool years ago and happened to murder his father and everybody else there, except one poor soul who managed to escape. Anyway, I digress a little bit. And he goes on, he mocks Creon. Do you think that you had friends enough to defeat me? Do you think you had money enough? I mean, this is absurd, right? And Creon begs him to listen to him, and Oedipus isn't really listening at all. He's already deemed him an enemy. He has no interest in it, right? Creon, does this, can you believe this obstinacy does you any good? And, Oedipus shoots right back. Can you believe that you may carry on intrigues against your house and go scot-free? Like, do you think you're going to be able to go through this and with impunity, with freedom from punishment? Do you really think that you can get away with this? Meanwhile, Creon's like, will you even budge a little bit? I mean, you're so obstinate. He's completely immovable on the subject. He has no interest in listening to him. So, of course, this is a losing battle. Oedipus sets up this whole concept of, hey, why didn't the soothsayer speak about me before? Why was he silent before? Why is he only talking now? Right? And he goes on to say, like, hey, you're the one who made him say that I was the killer. And then Creon goes on to say, hey, listen, would any man exchange a quiet life with royal rank assured for an uneasy throne? To be king in name was never part of my ambition, enough for me to live a kingly life. And he makes this argument to him, hey, listen, I have all the benefits of royalty without any of the hard work or responsibility. I would have much to do that irked me in your place. How could kingship please me more than royalty and rule without regret? I mean, this guy doesn't even have to regret the decisions that a king has to make, and yet he gets to reap all the benefits, right? People come and heap him with favors in order to get audiences with Oedipus. And then he doesn't have to worry about what the result of the audience is because that's on Oedipus, not him, right? And then so he lays out further that, in order to prove him guilty of some sort of compact, some sort of plot with Tiresias that, hey, why don't you go ahead and go to the Pythian shrine, ask about the message. Then, look with the soothsayer, the truth teller, the prophet, and see. And then if you can prove it, I'll condemn me to death. I'll join in the sentence. I'll agree. I'll want to be killed for that. And the chorus was like, hey, he's got a great point. Let's not be rash. And Oedipus is like, hey, when somebody's plotting, you got to be quick. You got to counterplot. And then Creon's like, wait, what do you want to do? You want to banish me then? And Oedipus is like, no, I want you dead. So he's very extreme. He's very angry. It's pretty brutal. And then he says, I know you're wrong. I know I'm right. In your own eyes, not in mine. That's kind of a clutch moment there with the whole motif of developing sight and seeing and truth and the unknown. And then we're down to name calling, calls him a knave, right? And then, he's like, what if you're mistaken? Kings must rule, not when they rule unjustly, right? It's like kings have to do. They have to do things, right? And Creon's like, yes, but not when they're wrong. You can't just do whatever you want whenever you want. And then cry out to the city, and it's my city and yours. And then Jocasta enters from the palace, and she comes out and basically scolds them for arguing in public like this. Like, what is wrong with you? Go home. You guys are blowing this thing out of proportion. And then they whine about it. Creon's like, no, that's not true. I mean, he's going to kill me. I mean, to be fair, I guess you probably should whine about that. And then Oedipus is like, well, it's true. I found him. I caught him. He's plotting against me. And Creon, again, lays out that's impossible. I would never do that. Jocasta begs Oedipus to believe it, for his oath's sake. Believe it for her sake. There are other people to witness, and the chorus themselves, consent, O king, consent, be merciful and learn to yield. And Oedipus is astounded, like, why should I repent? And they tell him, well, he's never played you false before. I mean, he's not known to be a liar. And now Oedipus has already jumped to the next stage. He's already assumed this next understanding of this, like, for what you pray. They say, well, yeah, we know. And he says, well, say more. He swore his friendship. Is it right to cast away a friend condemned unheard upon an idle word? And Oedipus says, in asking this, you ask my death or banishment. Because in Oedipus's mind, there's this syllogism that's set up, if-then statement, basically, that, if Creon is innocent, then it stands to reason that I must be guilty in his stead, because the soothsayer has blamed me, therefore I am guilty. So you're asking my death or banishment. And the chorus immediately leaps to his defense and says, no, not at all. Lost may I be to God and man if it was ever mine. But while our people pine, my heart is racked anew. If you, my princes, add your strife to our old misery. So Oedipus, he still isn't that convinced, but he says, you know what, fine. I'll be merciful, but I still hate him. And Creon just is still in basic disbelief. And Oedipus is like, whatever, just get lost. And Creon says, fine, but I've been unjustly judged by you alone. Kind of a shame on you moment, which, well, there'll be plenty of shame to go Oedipus's way eventually here, right? And so Jocasta wants to know how this all happened, and the chorus doesn't want to talk about it because it's a sore subject. And then Oedipus is like, well, gee, thanks a lot. And the chorus again is like, please, just believe us. We love you. We're gonna stick with you. We think you're the best. You saved us before. You can save us again. And Jocasta's like, well, are you going to tell me what's going on and how this all started? And he says, yes. You mean more to me than anybody else. So I'll tell you all about it, right? And we talk about the soothsayer, and he says, yeah, but he's shielding himself. It's the soothsayer, right? And then Jocasta, has a moment here which is almost on par with when Oedipus says he's going to fight for Laius as if he was his own father. She says, absolve yourself at once, for I can tell you, no man possesses the secret of divination. No man can tell the future. And she goes on to say, I have proof. An oracle was given to Laius. From Phoebus, no, but from his ministers. So, did it come from the god? No, but it came from the people who supposedly the god speaks through. That he should die by the hands of his own child. His child and mine. What came of it? Laius, it is common knowledge, was killed by outland robbers at a place where 3 roads meet. As for the child, it was not yet 3 days old when he cast it out. By other hands, not his. with riveted ankles to perish on the empty mountainside. There and then Apollo did not so contrive it. The offspring did not kill the father, for all his fears, was killed not by his son. Yet such were the prophet's warnings. Why should you then heed them for a moment? What he intends, the God will show us in his own good time. So when you go back and look at this, he talks about how, or she talks about rather, how an oracle was given to Laius. But at the whole time, it doesn't really matter because the truth actually occurred. He really did follow the prophecy. She believes this whole time that the child that was cast out died at 3 days old on the top of Mount Cithron, but that's just how she believes things to have happened. Let's just talk about the part that's in parentheses here, by other hands not his. That's to say, like, listen, he didn't commit infanticide, he didn't kill his own child, he had somebody else do it, and so therefore he's not a horrible person. The logic might seem flawed to a modern audience, and yet the Greeks believed that if you had somebody else cast out this child in accordance with trying to avoid fate or an oracle or something, and you had somebody else do it, well, then you weren't actually killing a child, you were just leaving the child's fate up to the gods, which, by the way, in this case, with riveted ankles to perish on the empty mountainside, he didn't perish on the empty mountainside. He was saved. So I guess in this instance, yeah, it was left up to the gods, and she falsely believes that the gods allowed the child to die, and yet we know that's not what happened. So her whole rationale for why you shouldn't believe prophets is just a big, giant swath of dramatic irony, where she's telling her son not to worry about an oracle because she had an oracle about her son, how her son was going to kill the father. Meanwhile, it's the mother who's married to the son, telling the son that not to heed these warnings. So it's comical, but in more of a upsetting, dark, gallows humor sort of way. And it goes on to say, my wife, what you have said has troubled me. My mind goes back and something in me moves. Because, of course, she talks about common knowledge where 3 roads meet, right? And this spurs this whole memory from Oedipus, the thing that's haunted him his whole life here. Ever since he had that horrible encounter, he's been trying to make up for it since, and he thought he was making up for it, when he battled the Sphinx and defeated it with, guessing the riddle and having it jump off the cliff and shatter to pieces, and then having 20 years of happiness here in Thebes. He really believes that he's been doing the right things, and yet now his mind goes back, and of course he starts asking for details and probing, and finds out that he was tall, silver frosted hair, about your figure. Well, that would make sense since it was his father, right? And then it goes on to say, like, what, my king, what is it you frighten me? And this is a beautiful line here. He said, had then the prophet eyes? Oh, is it possible? To prove it certain, tell me one thing more. I mean, it's beautiful. Suddenly he realizes, wait a minute, could that blind prophet actually see the truth? Did he really know? Is it possible that it's really me? And so he goes on and he asks about it, and of course it all lines up, right? And then he asks if that one survivor could be here, right? And Hephaestus says, no, when he came back and found you king in his late master's place, he earnestly begged me to let him go away into the country to become a shepherd, far from the city's eyes, which the city's eyes is, synonymous with eyes and seeing and the truth. So it goes on to say, no, when he came back and found you king in his late master's place, he earnestly begged me to let him go away. Of course he wants to go away. You watch some guy kill your king, and then you come back to your city, and you find out that the guy who just killed your king is now the new king. Pretty sure you want to get the heck out of there. Plus, there's some more interesting things to this shepherd that we'll find out about later. So, of course, she granted him his wish. I mean, he's always been loyal and a good person. And so Oedipus, wants him here. And she's like, well, yeah, we can have him here. And she's like, well, what's bugging you so much? And then he goes on to tell her where he came from, who he was. He heard about, some guy says he wasn't his father's son. He gets upset. He goes to his parents. His parents are upset, tell him that's absolutely not true. But it still kind of bugs him. So then he goes to Pytho. And the oracle, instead of giving him an answer, gives him this horrible oracle, which, of course, causes him to run away from home because he doesn't want to commit this horrible, horrible thing. And then he gets to the recounting of where the 3 roads meet and how the leader orders him out of the way. he gets struck, and then on his way past, Laius reached out and smacked him over the head, and then Oedipus just kills everybody there. He just hulks out, smashes, kills everyone. It's a pretty brutal moment. And then he says, this is so awful, you can't help but feel pity for him. He says, is there any more wretched mortal than I, more hated by God and man? It is I whom no stranger, no citizen must take to his house. I to whom none may speak. On me is the curse that none but I have laid. I'm the horrible person. His wife, these hands that killed him have touched her. Like, I'm so horrible. I killed this guy and then I married his wife. I'm a horrible person. And you're like, well, actually, it's way worse than that, right? So here he is. He feels like he's horrible. He's determined to find out the truth. And punish himself if need be. And he feels horrible about it. Now, somebody who is less than him might be like, you know what, we're just going to let this slide, sweep it under the rug, nobody has to know. But no, he is all about finding the truth. He is so honorable, he's motivated for all the right reasons. And then he reflects on how he's not going to be able to go to Thebes, and he's not going to be able to go to his land that he grew up in and calls his fatherland, mistakenly. And he can't go back to Corinth, and so he's going to have to leave because he is terrified that he's going to make his mother his wife and kill his father, right? And then he says, oh, never, never, holy powers above, may that day come. May I be sooner dead and blotted from the face of the earth than live to bear the scars of such vile circumstance. You can't help but feel pity for this guy because he has already done exactly that. And here he is saying to his wife/mommy, oh boy, I hope nothing like that ever happens. I'd rather be dead than have something that horrible happen. And yet, it's already occurred. And then the chorus is like, hey, well, don't jump to conclusions. We haven't heard the whole truth in the witness. Oedipus is like, yeah, that's my hope. And then Yocasta's like, why? What's the matter? Why would it matter then? It sounds like you got it all wrapped up. And he's like, yeah, but they said robbers. If this guy says robbers, then one is not more than one, right? So Yocasta is basically telling him, no, listen, it doesn't matter. He already said it once. He can't change it back. Don't worry about it. Like, it's all done. We don't need to worry about it. Just let's forget about it. And Oedipus goes, yeah, you're right, but I still want to get him here. And Yocasta obeys him, right? I will at once come in. I will do nothing other than you wish. So she still puts full faith in him, right? It's a pretty interesting moment. And it's something to come back to toward the end, right? And now and that ends the rising action. And so next we have the second Stasimone, as it were. Now let's discuss the second Stasimone here, which comes at the end of the rising action. The chorus says, I only ask to live with pure faith keeping in word and deed, that law which leaps the sky, made of no mortal mold, undimmed, unsleeping, whose living Godhead does not age or die. They're just asking to be able to keep faith in the gods, to live a good life, follow the laws, and have faith in the gods. And it goes on to talk about how pride breeds the tyrant. This is a common theme throughout many works of Greek literature, where people who have a false sense of pride, hubris, right? They think that they're better than they truly are. They reach above their station, and then they fall, and they're brutally punished by the gods. May God still prosper it, right? And it goes on to say, who walks his own high-handed way, disdaining true righteousness and holy ornament, who falsely wins, all sacred things profaning. Shall he escape his doomed pride's punishment? Shall he by any armor be defended from God's sharp wrath, who casts out right for wrong? These are rhetorical questions. Like, can anybody really escape punishment for committing such terrible wrongs, for not following the will of the gods, for breaking law, for doing things that they shouldn't do? Can anybody really avoid that? And if wickedness for virtue be commended, farewell, sweet harmonies of sacred song, farewell, O heart of earth, invalid, farewell, Abaean and Olympian altar, farewell, O heart of earth, invalid shrine. They're at a point of crisis here because their faith in the gods is being utterly questioned, because Yocasta and Oedipus both have basically said that the oracles are false. They can't be believed, that it doesn't hold true. And yet, if those don't hold true, then how can any faith in the gods hold true, right? Zeus, as thou livest, all ruling, all pervading, awake, old oracles are out of mind. Apollo's name denied, his glory fading. There is no godliness in all mankind. We can't believe in godliness in mankind. There is no faith left to us. There is nothing for us to put our faith in. And we have this other problem because we believe in Oedipus and we love him and we love our king, and yet we need oracles to be right and true. Otherwise, how can we have faith and belief in the gods themselves? So there needs to be some sort of godly communication. They want Zeus and Apollo to give them a sign to show it. Otherwise, how do they maintain their faith? Now, we know, we as an audience know, and unlike the chorus, we know that there should be faith in the gods because clearly they have held true to they've kept their part. They've held their end of the bargain. It's already been decided. Their fate has already been sealed, and they have followed it. Just hasn't been brought into the light yet. No one really sees it, except, of course, our blind seer who laid it all out. And thus ends the explanation for the second Stasimon.